What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? You know what time it is. We are live and direct with the Thug Birds podcast. We have the pleasure of having Austin coming on to the podcast, head of communications at Solana Labs. Before we get to it, you know what time it is. If you got yourself an iPhone and or an Android, go to the Play Store, download the FTX app. Stay up to date with the latest cryptocurrencies and NFTs. Without further ado, I'm your host, Gaddis TV. What's going on? And yeah, let's get to it. All right, so we are live and direct. So first off, I want to say, Austin, thank you for coming out and taking some time out of your evening and being on the podcast. So thank you for that.
Yeah, certainly. Glad to be here.
And for the people that will be listening, because kind of like we were saying before, and a lot of people will honestly know who you are, I guess kind of what you do. But for the people that don't, just a quick, I guess, who are you? What were you doing before crypto? And what got you involved in crypto in general?
Yeah, totally. So I run communications here at Solana Labs. I work on a bunch of the product strategy as well. That includes a lot of the reference implementations that, we build or work with teams to build. Some of that ends up being work that turns out to be Metaplex, which is the foundational framework for all of the NFT activity on Solana, which is pretty cool and exciting. I joined the team here February 1st of this year. So, just coming up on the 1 year mark, which is a lot of fun. And then before that, I was running product marketing for Bison Trails, which was then acquired by Coinbase. They were a sort of blockchain infrastructure provider and that sort of thing. And then, before that, my first time getting into crypto was actually, I bought some Bitcoin and then just lost keys a while ago back in, the early days when nothing mattered. But was running marketing for Republic and Republic Crypto. And so Republic was doing, giving basically non-accredited investors, which is 95% of the US population, the ability to invest in both early stage startups. And then also they had this cool model called the token DPA, where you could do token sales to non-accredited investors if the tokens were basically constructed in this weird debt instrument and locked for a year. So it was pretty cool. We did a bunch of great 2017-18 ICO, zombies. But it was honestly, there's a lot of good things that came out of that too. A lot of projects that were far too early for their time, but I think could have been really cool today.
Yeah, that's something I've heard a lot, honestly, in general, that a lot of projects that probably would have been doing great now were too early in its time. So hopefully they get a little sprucing up for them in general. So I guess kind of in general, were we always, I guess, into the like the finance and stuff like that? Or I guess back when it was realistically, you had, I guess, the keys of ledgers and it was too early?
I came into this in a weird path. I did political science and environmental science undergraduate. All of my undergraduate thesis work was on transboundary water resource management treaties. So like Indus River Compact, Oslo Accords, all that stuff. How do you build, it's kind of funny because it all ends up in crypto someday, right? It's how do you build self-reinforcing mechanisms in political systems, which is why when everyone was in this sort of like, oh, code is law era of crypto, I was like, y'all don't know what you're talking about. Like nothing's law, right? Human consensus and like people agreeing on stuff is all that really matters. And that the whole process of blockchain is just automating human consensus. It's not replacing it, right? We still have to agree to update software packages. We all have to agree to run validators. If there's a hard fork, you're choosing something, right? There's no code that's telling you which is the right hard fork. It's all just the subjective decision about like, do I do ETH or do I do ETH Classic, right? That it's just all people's choice. So it's kind of funny. Yeah, my first formal job was actually running digital content for a public radio station.
Nice.
Crazy.
I like it.
Got a good $28,000 a year there.
Did you ever see yourself in, maybe not the exact position right now with like, I guess like Solana, but did you ever see yourself in the position like messing with crypto in general, other than like, I guess, trading, stuff like that? Or
Yeah, so, it's kind of a funny thing. I did a lot of the technical infrastructure that makes like radio stations work, right? That like my job wasn't that, but like my student job in college to kind of like pay and get through was working on all the live event productions and running sound engineering and lighting design for bands that would be touring through and everything like that. And so I had a really good sense of that like technical underpinnings of it. And it's kind of funny because like, Solana proof of history, I wouldn't say it's based on, but it's extrapolated from TDMA, which is time division multiple addressing, which was a technology that was really popular in cell phone radios and sort of made the 3G revolution possible of that tech. And so it's kind of funny. There's a lot of the stuff I was working on then, which was like, how do you send audio data over a network connection? Because if you think about it, audio data, we're on about a 60-second delay just because that's what Zoom and YouTube built in. But that data, when you're doing live sound, it's got to get there, and it's got to get there in like 5 or 10 milliseconds. And so there's this whole standard called TSN, which is time-sensitive networking. And, what's cool is like, again, like Solana, it's kind of like rebuilding this stuff for the public internet. TSN required special routers and special switches, and it required special protocols. But like all this stuff is like surprisingly interconnected to stuff I was doing in my life that like, no idea this would ever end up with a blockchain company, right? This is like, 2014, like blockchain was barely a thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
pretty
honestly,
cool.
Unfortunately, I didn't know about it back then, but no, that's cool. And I get you were in the I guess the lighting and everything like that because the bulk is looking fresh. You got the lighting behind it. You know what I mean? I see you working with that one, so shout out to you on that. With the I guess on you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but on I guess the position that you do because I guess people like that were listening, of course, the good old parents that are listening that don't know really what these things are. I guess what does I guess what is your job entitled? You know what I mean? Is it I guess just like writing code, looking at charts, or
So for me, it's a really weird role, right? Like working for a layer one is very strange, right? It's a lot of work with engineers around like product specs and strategy. How do you red team a system design? How do you think about ways that people are going to try and interfere with something? And then, a lot of the work is building reference implementations. It's not building finished products, right? We talked about like primitives in DeFi, right? And so what a primitive is just a fancy term for something that's not really all the way built, right? It's components that you can take and you can build something else on top of. So if you look at like the stake pool code, right? That was something that like, I'm not a programmer myself. I'm not writing the code, but like, I'm looking at that from an adversarial perspective and being like, okay, how are these two components going to work together? What does that interface point look like? Do you have to bolt an AMM onto this thing to make sure there's enough liquidity for someone to actually be able to redeem a stake pool token? How do you fund those liquidity pools? How do you do you need an oracle to set price feeds for all this stuff? It's all of that work that then is like, here's a core system design. Mandarin, go take this, Marinade, go take this and build the Marinade stake pool implementation or something along those lines, right? And so it's a very weird job because it's usually working both on like stuff that's going to work in a few months in terms of reference implementation and then working with some teams, right? Like when I started, 90% of the teams launching on Solana, I was talking to in some capacity, right? About marketing or, hey, here's how, like, yeah, we don't have any good wallets, but Phantom's coming, like that sort of thing, right? And now, I would say less than 5% of the teams that are launching are in some ways talking to anyone at Solana Labs, right? The growth has been really excellent. And one of the weirdest things about like this job is you're constantly trying to get yourself fired, right? You're constantly trying to say like, how can I not do this anymore? And how can the community take it over? And that's one of this, like, this is the whole process of decentralization, right? There's the physical decentralization, right? There's a Nakamoto coefficient of 19. There's 1,100 validators all around the world run by independent parties. That's like the physical part. But then there's the sort of the social part, right? Is Solana Labs running X or Y, or is the community running it? And what's really nice over the last year is like the community's running a ton because, there's now podcasts about NFTs, right? How cool is that?
Yeah, shout out to everyone. Yeah. I think it's honestly cool because again, like I guess, like you said in the podcast stuff, like I started this one just to get more info just on myself, and then, well, not on myself, but like to get knowledge, because knowledge is power. You know what I mean? And great knowledge is great power. I forgot exactly who said that, but I'm pretty sure someone smart and famous did. But honestly, like I'm new-ish to the whole Solana stuff to an extent. Again, I mean, I have the NFT stuff like that, but I know like the dumb questions on what is a layer one, or and even like the difference. People say Web3, Web2, things like that on what are those. Can you, I guess, explain the easy stuff as if you were talking to like a mom and dad on those things, because and maybe not in depth, but like what's the difference between a layer, or not even a layer, just a Web 2 and 3? What are those differences?
Yeah, so Web3 is a real paradigm shift from anything we've seen before. So the Web 2 world, you're signing into a platform or a service or a something that's owned by a company that, without fail, is either selling you a subscription or ads, or in the case of YouTube, both, right? And they're taking a lot of that revenue, right? So the original Web 2 platform promise was like, come here, have fun. There's going to be some ads. It'll be fine, right? And over time, this whole Web 2 world, whether it's Facebook, Meta, whatever, or Twitter, or these things get into more and more parts of our lives. To like the apartment building I'm in, the neighbors association, whatever thing, it's a Facebook group. Like, how did that happen? How did we like let that happen, right? And so the relationship between like the platform and the person who uses it, it went from something that it was like, oh, this is fun, I'll post some pictures of my trip so everyone can see them on it, to like, oh, I have to use this thing, but also it's stealing all my data, it's showing ads, it's like genuinely making people miserable. Like, you can go look up the research studies that are funded by Facebook that they then try and bury, that say Facebook's making you miserable. And so the Web3 transition is like, what if you owned Facebook? What if we all owned Facebook? Would it be better? Now, one of the things about this is a lot of people say like, well, no, it won't be better, right? The internet's a cesspool and it will always be a cesspool. But I think it's like every shareholder meeting for Facebook, they vote to fire him. Like 85 to 90% of the Facebook shareholders vote to fire Mark Zuckerberg. But they can't, because it's a dual class shareholder company. And like, if Facebook were run on a blockchain, Mark would have been out years ago.
Deuces.
Yeah.
And so it's just about giving people more power and ownership of these networks and getting it out of this corporate mindset. It's a giant digital co-op, right? And you're all owners in it.
Nice. I guess question on that, because I remember I heard Mark Cuban say something a long time ago. 'Cause I know he was always in like tech. It wasn't about crypto, but it was kind of something like similar to what you said. All the basically like the Facebooks, the companies are getting data. You know what I mean? Which essentially is it's registering. Hey, of course we give you this ad, which it tracks, so to say, in that essence of it.
Sure.
I'm sure people will be listening and asking, is there ways to make sure like on the Web3 stuff like that doesn't happen, or why, how does that not happen?
So without getting too deep into it,
For sure.
things on blockchain, there's no free lunch on blockchain. Everything has to pay its own transaction fee. On Ethereum, that's a gas fee, right? That can be anywhere from a few bucks to a few $100, depending on what you're trying to do, right? On Solana, these things are, about $0.0025 for a transaction. So, the fee models vary, of course, depending on the systems. But, if every time you uploaded a photo to Facebook, if it cost you a tenth of a penny, would you care? I think most people would not care. I think most people would be very happy to say, like, I'm getting utility out of this. I'm going to pay a little bit of money for it. And, like, that's going to be great. So the business model becomes different, right? When everyone's an owner of the system, you no longer are trying to extract as much data from a person as you can and then sell that data to an advertiser to sell ads back to you, right? And this is like the poison pill of a lot of these social networks is they're designed to keep you engaged. Because the more you're engaged, the more you're clicking around, the more ads you see. And when it's a fee-based model, I mean, yeah, you want to use the system more, but there's a cost to using the system more, right? It's a very different system design. And the other thing too is like most blockchain stuff is just if not private by default, anonymous by default. And that's like one of the real big differences there. And then you're seeing technologies like zero knowledge proofs be applied to things that would, there's a new confidential payment system built on Solana where I could send you a certain amount of tokens and no one from the outside would be able to see how many tokens that were. Now, why is that important? Well, if I'm getting, if my company's paying me in USDC, it would be really nice if everyone didn't know what my salary was, right? All of
Yeah,
those sorts of things. Like, we're getting to a place where like this dream of getting away from a bank and getting away from ADP and all these payment providers and waiting 2 weeks for your check. Like, if you're getting paid on blockchain, you can get paid by the minute if you want.
literally. Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, I like that. That's honestly fucking already mind blown on that one.
It's revolutionary. It's
Yeah,
crazy. Like that's why I like trying to tell people, that aren't really into crypto. It's like all they hear about. It sucks that like everything in the media is just like buzzwords like NFTs and like like just like it's just stuff that makes us cringe, right? And we're just like, oh my god, it's just so much more than that. And it's important to like to get that information out there that like this tech exists for a reason. It's not all just like people trading useless JPEGs and stuff like that.
yep.
useless. Question on, because I know, I kind of messaged you on this one as well. I'm going to ask you some about the hater questions. I'm sure people will ask the non-Solana people, things like that. And just in general for people who, I guess, want to know what's going on. I guess, like with the stuff when Solana like went down, and I mean went down because I don't know all the technical terms, stuff like that. I guess what causes something like that?
Yeah.
And how?
So the network actually did not go down recently, right? There was a slowdown that occurred on Friday and then again on Monday, but the network actually was still processing 1,000 transactions per second, which is a lot, right?
Yeah.
If you look at something like Ethereum steady state's about 15 transactions per second, right? So you're still talking about a network that is much more available than a lot of the other systems that exist. Now that's very different than the normal steady state of the network. Mm-hmm. So the short version of what happened, and there's a much more technical explanation available too, is a bunch of bots tried to get in on an initial token offering, an IEO that was hosted on Radium. Now, the way the network is designed is it assumes that it has metering systems in place, right, to prevent too many transactions from coming in. But that metering system is based on volume of transactions. It's not currently appropriately accounting for how certain transactions are harder to do than others, right? It's sort of like how different, there are words that are very easy to pronounce, and there's words that are very hard to pronounce, and they can be the exact same number of letters, right? The requirements for a specific transaction aren't something that the metering system was taking into account. So these transactions were intentionally failing. They were designed to be really heavy so that people could get a better price on this initial IDO. The network slowed down because of that and then was able to recover afterwards from it. So there wasn't a denial of service attack. There wasn't anything like that. It was just a bunch of, it was some bots and degens trying to get a good price on a token.
Yeah.
Now that shouldn't happen, right?
Right.
Like the network is designed in a way that shouldn't happen. And clearly those systems failed. And there's a whole bunch of developers all over the world. Some of them work for Solana Labs. Some of them work for many other companies that are working on these problems now, and they're trying to figure out better ways to prevent that from happening.
No, 100%. And that's, I'm sure the best answer is right. There's no BS, nothing like that.
It wasn't even that bad. Like it wasn't that bad. I was using Solana like during the outage, I guess, and like all you had to do was, I had a couple transactions go through, a couple failed, but you just had to keep trying your transaction. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, and the same systems. I mean, look, something similar happened to Ethereum in March of 2020, right?
Yeah.
The network became really clogged and congested with transactions, and the mempool overflowed, and so you couldn't get transactions through. Now, one of the really interesting things is like most blockchains are based on the Ethereum virtual machine, which is obviously what Ethereum is based on. But if you look at any of the Ethereum layer 2 scaling solutions, anything like that, they're all running on the EVM. And EVM is great because it's battle tested. It's 6 years old at this point, but it has one layer for consensus, which is technically Nakamoto consensus, which is different. And the EVM runs on top of that. And that means there's a lot of round trips that have to happen. It's pretty slow, right? You can't get EVM to run at 65,000 transactions per second without doing a bunch of other work to it. Solana has a totally different runtime, but it's much newer code, and it's just not there yet, right? A lot of the features that are in EVM that have been built out over the last 6 years, they're not in Solana yet. And so the network can't necessarily, or at this point, it can't necessarily adapt and respond in the same way. And that's just a question of code base maturity, and like it'll get better and it'll get fixed over time. But like, it's also not like the network's going to be 100% perfect tomorrow. Right.
Yeah,
these are building processes. Even you see these transaction problems happen on Ethereum every once in a while, and that's the most mature, audited, secure code base that exists, apart from Bitcoin.
No, I like it because I know when I was on the Twitter, you know what I mean. Honestly, it was the same stuff that I guess read that you were saying as well. So it makes sense, the people that are in the space will understand. Like you said, hey, they were trying to get a good price. They had the boss. It's like, unfortunately, everything else, but it is good as well. I mean, like you said, yeah, it had a little hiccup on there, but again, it still is like the, I guess, early stages, so to say. And like you said, there's nothing is perfect. And like you said, maybe not you exactly, but people in Solana and just devs in general are, I guess I would say, working on it just to find those things and make them better.
No piece of software is ever done.
I like that. I actually never heard that, but that makes perfect sense because there's always someone trying to hack it or something like that. So
except that like smart plug you bought in like 2014 doesn't work with anything anymore.
The beeper's still going off on the wall. Like, what the hell, bro? I guess kind of another techie question. I've heard some people say, I don't know if it's right, wrong. Well, I know it's not. Well, I don't know anything. The people that I've read, the comments are, oh, Solana's not, or it is centralized, it's not decentralized. On basic terms, I guess, why would people say that, and what would you say, I guess, to them?
Yeah, so, the question of decentralization, like, I love this one because no one's ever defined what decentralization is, right? Is it censorship resistance over an hour, 2 hours, over 400 milliseconds, right? Like, what does it mean for a network to be decentralized? And you ask anyone who's sort of complaining about this, and like, they can't really give you an answer, right? It's sort of like, if you heard the Bitcoin maxis talking about Ethereum years ago, you'd ask them like, well, what's wrong with Ethereum? They would give you lots of general problems that are wrong with blockchain that all also apply to Bitcoin, right? So it's sort of a funny place to be in. There's over 1,100 validators on mainnet beta for Solana. There's another 1,200 that are RPC servers, which also carry a full copy of the ledger. So they're globally distributed, right? They're in everywhere but Antarctica. And like, I'd love to work on that. If anyone is in Antarctica and has a high-speed internet connection, let me know. But at this point, the network has a Nakamoto coefficient of 19. That's higher than, if you look at stake pools and if you look at mining farms on Ethereum, that's significantly higher than the amount of centralized control that exists on Ethereum. So the question is like, where are you measuring, right? Like, what point of the stack are you measuring? There's definitely more individual holders of Ethereum than there are individual holders of Solana, because there's been 6 years for those tokens to kind of trickle out and people to sell and people to buy small amounts of it. And it's still easier to buy Ethereum just for people around the world. But that's not really the right metric to look at this for, or level to look at this, right? If you're looking at cost of hardware too, like, yeah, it's more expensive to run a Solana validator than it is to run an ETH2 validator, but you also need 32 ETH, and it's pretty expensive to get 32 ETH. Not many people can go out and just buy 32 ETH casually.
Yeah. Hey, appreciate it. At least not this guy. I know we are getting closer to that time frame, so I want to stay
Sure.
I guess close to it. Honestly, so on your personal thoughts on, like, I guess the state of crypto. I want to say Solana in general. I mean, like, what, I use the basic terms. What makes you bullish with crypto? You know what I mean? What gets you excited about it?
Yeah. So, it's like trying to put a good idea back in a box, right? You can't do it. Like, the idea is out. Like, this concept of like shared ownership of like digital spaces is out, right? The fact that, like, there's a community of NFT profile pictures that's got like a podcast, right? The monkeys are running a validator. Like the world's crazy, right? The thing about this, it's a really infectious idea, right? You start out being like, oh, I'm going to be a part owner of this network. And then you're sort of like, well, wait a minute, why am I not also a part owner of X and Y and Z? And so I think the thing about crypto is like, you know, like the idea is just too infectious in the human brain to put it away. It's like putting capitalism away, right? Like once that system was invented, like there's something about like the human brain that's like, yeah, okay, market systems, I get this, right? And even if you're not a supporter of capitalism, you have to agree that it is like an infectious idea that has taken over the world. And I think Web3 and crypto specifically is the same way. It's an idea that's not going anywhere. And quite frankly, there's a lot of really old centralized companies that are have incredibly fat margins that everyone should own. And there's no reason, you know, you look at something like Helium. Helium's building an alternative wireless network to replace cell phone carriers, where the towers are hosted by individuals, they're owned by people, right? You're not paying a monthly fee, you're paying for data usage. They have 400,000 nodes all over the world broadcasting this thing, right? And like, that's something, right? That you got 400,000 people to like put a box in their window. 400,000 spouses agreed that it was okay to put a box in your window, right? Like, how crazy is that? So, yeah, it's just like we're still like, people keep being like, oh yeah, we're like early Web 2 days. It's like, no man, we're like, you know, we haven't even hit like DSL yet. This is like dial-up internet days. This is so early.
Yeah. That's one thing, I guess, in general with the crypto, I guess I was always interested, not just like Solana, but just because I kind of started getting in. What up, kitty? I got started like the 2017. I'm money knows. I'm the diamond hold hander. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I've been around it, but I've always interested me because I've always thought the simple way minded as of, you know, I remember back in the day when people were like, I was barely old enough, I guess, to remember, but they're like, oh, credit cards will never be on anything. It's cash is king. Like you're insane if you think it's gonna be a credit card. And to an extent, it's like the same type of ordeal where, you know what I mean, once the regular mom and pop knows how to do the things and like how I guess we would overall, it's gonna be night and day in a lot of things. Hopefully, you know, I guess like you said before, and when we started the podcast, like projects that started beforehand that have still been grinding will get their light of day. Because in general, I know there's, like you said, probably great projects and things that can be done now compared to beforehand.
Totally.
On, I guess, kind of the last question, because we're right at that 40-minute mark.
Yeah.
And I guess I know you don't own it, you didn't run it, but what would you say? I guess Solana's goal is. What would you say they want to be known for as?
Yeah, so you know, I would say Anatoly, who's one of the original system architects, he's been pretty clear about this. It's a global marketplace for all information clearing. It's the exchange layer and settlement and execution environment that the whole world can run on. It's a fast enough blockchain to make that possible, and you know, so like this was talked about at Breakpoint, which was the first real in-person Solana conference, which was held in Lisbon. Hugely fun time. Got to see a bunch of developers who like you only know as like Discord avatars, and you finally meet them in person. You're like, you're a real human. Like, how crazy is that? You're not just like a bird.
Yeah.
You know, the question is like, how do you get to 1 billion users who are all holding their own private keys, who are all in charge of their financial assets? They're not relying on a bank. They're not relying on a centralized exchange to hold them for them, right? They're able to carry them with them and take them with them. And you can't take that away from people. And that really is the short-term / medium-term goal is like, what's the fastest path to 1,000 people using, 1 billion people using their own cryptography?
Nice. Awesome. For the people that would be listening in general and they're interested and want to like follow you on Twitter, things in that nature of it, where can people find you at? What's your handle? What's your shout out?
Yeah, it's Austin_Federa. You can find me on Twitter. For some reason, I'm verified. I don't know why, but you really should just honestly go follow Anatoly. You're gonna find a lot more better content there.
Okay, that. Yeah, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end it. It's kind of like we did before. I'm going to mute it for a quick second. Thank you, though, for real, for coming out, taking some time out of your evening, and coming on the podcast. So with that note, we're going to go ahead and end the stream.
He's just,
y'all.
he goes mute on the other channel.
Cool. Sweet.
I can hear
Well,
you too, buddy.
Yeah.
With that note, might as well do it this way. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, one more time, thank you. It's been real. Show some love to Austin. Go ahead and follow us as well on Thugbirds Pod, and on the YouTube page as well. Till next time, y'all, stay fresh, stay positive, stay caw-cawing. Stay flying. Till next time, y'all. Caw-caw!